Hello, everyone, fellow Africans throughout the diaspora on the continent, people of the world, free world. Many of us celebrated when the destabilization of Libya occurred. Many of us were happy that another dictator got removed. The country was destroyed, even though we didn't know the consequences of what will happen. Now we see the after effect. But what if I told you that our mind was prepped decades before that event, that tragic event of the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, the destruction of Libya, and the destabilization of North Africa, the Sahel, and now imperialists are trying to move to West Africa. So I want to share a video with you of all Western intellectuals, Western, you know, officials, whatever they call themselves, some of them former officials and journalists, all the system roles and work and grinds to prep our mind to demonize people who are doing good for Africa or when they want to carry out their agenda in Africa. So watch this video. This video was done by a guy called Steve Hendricks. And this is nothing against that guy, but I want to show you what they are prepping against the Sahelian revolution. So watch this video.
Who is filling the power vacuum in the Sahel? France is gone. So is Wagner. Who's in charge now? I'm Steve Hendricks with your Global Minute. By early this year, French troops had fully withdrawn from Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, and the Ivory Coast, following rising anti French sentiment and coup governments. In Mali, Wagner has officially exited as well, replaced by Kremlin backed Africa Corps, deployed under a joint arrangement negotiated early last year. Meanwhile, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger signed the Alliance of Sahel States in mid last year, a military political bloc that coordinates defense, development, and counterterrorism outside ECOWAS. The result? A realpolitik shift from Western influence to a patchwork of regional juntas, Russian aligned security contractors, and emerging partnerships with Russia, China, and Turkey. Democracies remain weak. Counterterrorism governance is increasingly transactional. In the Sahel, sovereignty claims are real, but stability remains fragile. Keep your eye on corruption and human rights. I'm Steve Hendricks. That's your Global Minute.
So a lot to unpack there. Go in a minute or under a minute or just over a minute. So this idea that there's a power vacuum in the Sahel shows that these people, the way they view Africa is that Africans cannot desire their own sovereignty. This movement in the Sahel, in his words, are anti-French sentiment, or in Africa, anti-French sentiment. But excuse me, France neo-colonial policy, neo-colonial occupation of these countries are not anti-French sentiments. Africans are desiring, and they are doing so, kicking out the French by taking control of their natural resources, their sovereignty, and their destiny. So when we say these people prep the minds of Africans, they're using the same old trick that used that they've been using for decades, since the 1960s, 1950s, since the arrival of the first, revolutionary leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah and so forth in Africa. So he spoke about the French So much to unpack here. He spoke about the French troops being kicked out of Africa and so forth, and kicked out. You see, he threw Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast out in there. We know the French troops haven't left Ivory Coast. They're there. This was just made and announced, and because pressure are being pushed on a lot of these reactionary leaders in West Africa to announce that they are, you know, parting way that French troops are leaving African territory, like in Cote d'Ivoire. You can see there was no denunciation of the security agreements which allowed the troops to be just stationed there. And he spoke about anti-French sentiment again. But we all know this is anti-colonial, neo-colonial movement, revolutions that are making its way throughout Africa and the Sahel. And then he spoke about, Wagner left, and you see the way he emphasized a lot of stuff like Kremlin backed, Kremlin backed African core. But the last time I checked, the so-called African core, Africa core, as they call it, is a part of the Russian state. It's a part of the Russian military. So when you say Kremlin back, as if these are rebels, these are outside. Yes, they're outside for it, but these are not country to country cooperation. These are just rogue groups that are being backed by Russia. This is security partnership between the Sahel nation and Russia. Whatever you might think, that is what it is. So these are a lot of stuff. These are a way they prep our mind. These are a way they prep our minds to start thinking, oh my gosh. And the idea of replacing one colonizer for another colonizer. And in their mind, Africans cannot desire freedom. Africa cannot be free. These people can't be free. They're leaving us, the colonizer, for other colonizers, the Chinese, the Turks which is their allies, and the Russians. So you see the way these people, the condescending behavior of these Western intellectuals who come and speak down to African. If African can desire freedom, desire sovereignty, and yeah. In Jamaica they say jackass say we're on a level, and I'm telling you, Africa with their life no balance. Hey, life no balance. And what is the obsession with these Western intellectuals with African countries that are desiring their freedom? Why does it hurt these people? Why do they care about Africa so much? You care about Africa so much that you're worrying that there's a power vacuum in Africa. It's scary. These people, they are spokesperson of policymakers. People make policies that will, further their agenda in Africa. So I I thought that's really interesting. Power vacuum in the Sahel. The Sahel needs to be there has to be a foreign force in the Sahel, the West. That's what they want. So he spoke about anti-French sentiment again, which is what he's calling. Let's look at what has happened since the West, since the French was kicked out from the Sahel. Hospitals are being built. Nuclear power plants are being constructed or on their way to be constructed. Roads, you see in Burkina Faso, roads are being constructed. 3,000 kilometers of paved road since independence is what Burkina Faso could brag of. 5,000 of roads was the most roads constructed in Burkina Faso. If that is anti-French sentiment, then yes, we're happy with anti-French sentiment. And the arrogance of France to think that Africans desiring freedom, Africans are desiring a better better life, food sovereignty, people to have health care, clean water, electricity, basic things that are being provided in Europe with African resources. These are the basic things that people are desiring in Africa. You're calling this anti-fence sentiment or anti-Western sentiment. This is just plain arrogance, racialism. These people don't think that Africa deserves what basic human being should have in the 21st century in 2025. So refineries, refineries are being built, gold refineries are being built. These countries are taking larger percentage of their gold reserve, their natural resource reserves. Is that anti-French sentiment? Because France can continue to loot these countries. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about manufacturing consent, and these people are not just speaking to Africa, but they're speaking to a Western audience, prepping the mind of Westerners so that they can demonize by demonizing these leaders, so that over time they can carry out their agendas. So, ladies and gentlemen, so they're bringing out the same playbook that they played for decades, demonizing African leaders. You always see African leaders being dragged away to the International Criminal Court. And right now, there are many leaders in Africa that should be in the criminal court, International Criminal Court, even though we don't think these people should be judging African, whether it's African criminals or not. They shouldn't be judging them. It's inhumane. Africa should have its own criminal court or whatever to judge these people, to judge them on African justice and African values. So they're bringing out the same nonsense. And he spoke about instability. Look out for instability in the AES. The AES is being stabilized. The Western plan had failed in West Africa. Mali will not be divided. Burkina will not fall. Niger will not fall. The militaries, the fighters in the AES are doing their job. They're cleaning up these mercenaries. They're launching their development plan. Food sovereignty is being built, and so forth. So yes, your plan have failed. And there's something that he mentioned at the end of that video. You can go back and watch it, where he said, look out for human rights abuse, which show the next line they're going to take in the coming future. They're gonna be talking about human rights abuse in the Sahel, demonizing these Sahelian leaders. It's the same playbook. It's the same playbook they've used against leaders that have been fighting for their people. You see the way he emphasized the word military junta. Why do we have to put military with junta? We know a junta is is a military government. So why you have to emphasize that? Well, Africans, these people think we are Butu, as we say in Jamaica. We are not Butu. We're not Mumu. Many of us celebrated when we see the destruction of Libya, where there is open slave market in Libya. People who look like me are being sold as our ancestors were being sold 400 years ago, all because of Africans accepting what we've been programmed to accept. It doesn't matter, even the things they so-called accuse Muammar Gaddafi, it doesn't justify the destruction of a whole country, the destruction of the whole region. the amount of the loss of life that occurred since the fall of Gaddafi's government in Libya and outside Libya in neighboring states, it does not justify that. So, fellow Africans, we complain every time. Oh, African leaders, oh my gosh, we can't we can't listen to these Western officials. We can't listen to these Western propagandists either. I don't care what anybody wants to say. I'm not being paid by anyone to say anything. I'm just a young guy. I wasn't even born on the continent. Most people wouldn't even be able to tell that. But I know the importance of Africa for African people. And to use a more political term, I know the importance of Africa for Black people and also for the world. So this is the way they prep our minds. They prep their population mind for the cynical agenda that they plan to carry out against African states, African people, they want to destabilize the Sahel. Of course, they're gonna push human rights. Oh, there's violation of human rights. There's corruption. And let's talk about this thing about corruption. When they speak about corruption, yes, there's corruption in Africa. If anybody have watched my previous videos, they know that when it comes to African politicians, if I had the power, there wouldn't be one of them around. Let's say that there wouldn't be one of them around. But still, who are corrupting these African politicians? Who the multinational that are bribing these politicians? They are driving corruption in Africa as well. They are the corrupter. You have the corruptor and the corruptee. When you leave a people in a desperate situation, in poverty, it's easy to find people. There, you can close your eye and find somebody who will be corrupted. But you, the multinationals, these international organizations that are coming, putting money in the hands of these corrupt leaders, these corrupt politicians, and so forth. And let's go a bit further with this. The so-called corruption money that they're talking about, the corruption in Africa compares nothing to what is being taken out of the continent, not by these corrupt leaders, but by these multinational. You tell me, France was taking $500 billion per year from 14 African countries. No, that is corruption on an industrial scale, as Professor Lumumba would say, compared to the little peanuts that they're bribing to take. Corruption is when Niger is getting 80 cents per kilo for its uranium, while the market value is $200. How is that not corruption? Who is taking that 199, yes, say $199? Is these is these Western corporations? And you're telling us that we should watch out for corruption. Of course, we will watch out for corruption, of course, because all these multinational and their lackeys in African governments are being exposed. You can't hide it anymore. You saw a few years ago, Ghana tried to negotiate a deal for its lithium where it's taking 3%. 3%? 3%. For what? What are these people bringing that you yourself you're getting free 3%? What can you do with 3%? Do you set the price of that 3%? Do you know what is going? Are they just taking lithium? Are they taking something else? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why them people think we are fool. But ladies and gentlemen, um, this is I refuse to go any further. But this is how the propaganda works. It's very slow. It's deliberate. Try to convince us that the Sahel leaders are going to going to be corrupt and whatever. So thank you so much for watching this video. Salute.